There we go. So as you can see, this is an overview of all the bills that were filed. So we had a total of 903 bills filed this session. About 19% of those ultimately passed and will become law, assuming the governor signs all of them. Of those 903 bills, 146 of them had some sort of educational focus to them. Ultimately, only 19 of the education-focused bills passed, about 13%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I promise you there were plenty of provisions tucked into those bills. This is a pretty typical passage rate. We normally see more bills filed in a long session, but 20% is plenty of bills to be added into law every year. So next slide. The next slide is just going to show us a quick overview of kind of the key topics we want to hit on. First would be school accountability and hold harmless. That was a topic that everyone was talking about heading into session and was handled relatively quickly in the first half of session. School freedom and deregulation was another key theme for legislators this session. And then we'll touch on some private school specific legislation, and then we'll go through a number of other education related bills and some provisions that may be of importance to you. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And just a reminder, as we go through these, please let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be sure to get all those answered before we log off today. So the first one was Senate Bill 2, the School Accountability Hold Harmless Bill. It's provided for a 2-year hold harmless for school letter grades. So schools, and you've already received them for this year, if your 17-18 letter grade is better than your actual 18-19 letter grade, your 17-18 grade will be made public. Same thing for the next school year. All existing accountability consequences, if you are already a school in consequence, you remain under those same consequences. No new consequences will kick in until we have 2021 grades. Senate Bill 2 also prohibited any iLearn scores from being used in educator evaluations unless it actually helps improve the evaluation. So I will just say quickly, for any voucher participating schools that are under consequences, the same rules apply. If you want to appeal to the state board for a waiver, you can do so. And again, the timeline for those consequences, it'll just kind of skip these 2 years. So we'll go from the 17-18 grade and we'll pick up in 2021 for those 2-year DRF for consequences. Any questions on school accountability before we move on? All right, then we will head to House Enrolled Act 1003, which was the School Freedom and Deregulation Bill. So as soon as the 1003 slide pops up here on the screen, you'll see that there are a couple different categories in this bill. This bill kind of changed throughout session, began as a school freedom bill. Ultimately, our accreditation bill kind of morphed into this, which is a good thing. So the first category we want to talk about is teacher training. There was a lot of talk about all the mandated required teacher trainings. Many of them do apply to non-public schools, not all of them, but House Bill 1003 puts it all in the State Board of Education's hands. So it's their job to determine the timing, the frequency, and the method of each of these mandated trainings. So specifically, it includes bullying, child abuse and neglect, suicide prevention, human trafficking, and a variety of some coaching requirements, as well as CPR and the Heimlich. As part of this determining teacher trainings, They can make the decision that it may be best to be part of a license renewal process, and or perhaps it should be done in a teacher prep program as the teacher is preparing to enter the classroom. So just we'll keep our eyes peeled from the state board as they take action on this in the coming months. If you have any ideas or suggestions on how to streamline or improve teacher trainings, please let us know. We'd be happy to pass those thoughts along to the state board as they work through this. The second pillar in this bill is school flexibility. This is really the legislature's way of saying we want schools to kind of a bottom-up approach. So go back one slide, please. There we go. But really, what individual schools, what ideas and thoughts do they have to improve the academics in their school, right? So this allows for any individual school or a group of schools to apply to the state board for a waiver of a variety of laws under IC20 and also regulations under state board regs. So local school boards must sign off on the plan before you can present it to the state board. Essentially, you have to make your case of here's what we want to change and why, how we think it will improve student outcomes or improve the mission of our school. It may not be just a flat out, we want to eliminate X, Y, and Z from existing requirements, but it could be we have a different approach and want to try something different and need the permission of the state board to maybe have a little more flexibility around there. So I would encourage you all to be thoughtful about if there are things that you think would impact your school specifically, ideas, if there are things that you think might be would apply to a lot of schools, we'd be happy to work with you all on what some sort of group of school waiver process might look like. But again, these are meant to be kind of built from the ground up. What are your local teachers asking for? What would make a difference in the lives of your students? There is a list of statutes that unfortunately grew throughout the session that are not allowed to be waived. We did our best to keep this list small. We advocated for no list at all. But as soon as you start taking away requirements, people come out of the woodwork for what they want you to keep. So there's a variety of things that you cannot waive. Student safety, background checks, bus safety, things like that. Much of IC 2030-5, which includes like historical documents and displaying the flags and things like that. Accountability assessments, special ed law, financial reporting, and transparency. So those are all things that you can't be waived. There's a very specific list in statute. We're happy to send that to anybody who wants it. And again, please let us know if you have any ideas or thoughts as you think through this. The bill does require the state board to report back to the General Assembly annually on how many schools sought waivers on what types of issues, how many were approved, how many were denied, and why. I think the hope is that the General Assembly will see if they have a lot of consistent themes, and maybe they can just eliminate that across the board for everybody, but to really learn from what are some schools doing that could be best practices for others. So next slide, please. The publishing of annual performance and financial reports, this is just to simplify it, but it really only applies to public schools, so you all don't need to worry about that. The last thing I have on this slide is really the most important to non-pubs, I believe, which is the school accreditation. So for those of you who have freeway accreditation and know that we've been working on a process to kind of update this system beginning 3 years ago, Senate Bill 455 started out this session as the school accreditation bill. It was House Bill 1640 last year that many of you may remember ultimately died because the cursive writing mandate was added to it. But this year it finally crossed the finish line as part of 1003, and we're very thankful for that. But essentially it phases out the 25-year-old freeway accreditation system and streamlines accreditation under one system in the state. So if you are currently operating under a freeway contract, you will continue through the end of your contract and then switch over to this new performance-based accreditation system. The state board is not allowed under this law to renew or grant any new freeway contracts after June 30th of this year. and at the very latest, freeway accreditation will expire at the end of July 1, 2025, if not sooner, based on your contract. So it's important to know that this new accreditation system still allows a path for flexibility, just like freeway did. It essentially takes away some of those extra accountability factors that were in the freeway system, right? As you know, it's a 25-year-old system that was put in place before our existing accountability statute. So we kind of take away those barriers. It's just here are all the factors that you need in order to receive accreditation. You're held accountable on the back end through our A through F system. So any questions on accreditation or anything in School Freedom, House Bill 1003 before we move on?
Sorry, Caitlin? Caitlin?
Yes.
This is Cam Carter. When it's 1003 says the schools must report to the General Assembly, is there a distinction or a meaningful distinction between reporting to the General Assembly or the public? Will those reports on the waivers and what was waived on a per school basis be available to the public, or just members of the General Assembly?
All General Assembly reports are public. They're not necessarily always the easiest to find, but yes, they are made public. And it'll be a State Board of Ed report, so not individual schools reporting. So my guess is it will be probably a summary of here's everything. I don't know if it will specifically list individual schools or not. Okay. But yes, it will be publicly available.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? All right, so private school specific legislation, obviously 1003 had some private school specifics to it. The only other bill in this area that I wanted to touch on, well, two actually, was House Enrolled Act 1066, which was a Various Education Matters bill. When it left the House, it included language to fix the sibling care income improvement pathway and also added foster care as a ninth pathway into the voucher program. We had a lot of conversations in the Senate with this language. Ultimately, their leadership was supportive of the policy change, but uncomfortable making it in a non-budget year. So that language was removed. We did work all throughout the end of session to try to get this language passed in the final hours, but the Senate stood strong on their goal of not wanting to do anything that may impact the budget in a non-budget year. So this language ultimately did not pass. I do want to thank many of you because we had lots of input and feedback through our Action Center, communicating with legislators the importance of these changes. I will say that legislators have a better understanding of why these are necessary. We expect this to be a much easier fix next year, but unfortunately it didn't make it through the finish line this year. The other private school specific that I wanted to mention was Senate Bill 250. You may all remember this was the bill filed by Senator J.D. Ford early on in session. We asked all of you to get engaged. This is the bill that would have restricted your employment decisions for private schools. Thankfully, that bill did not move. We didn't even see. We expected to see a number of second reading amendments added to bring this issue up, but thankfully, there wasn't as much of a focus on it this year. So, but we really appreciate your communication with legislators. I had numerous comments from legislators that, you know, okay, I've gotten tons of email. We get the picture. We're not going to mess with private schools this year. So it really did make a difference, and we appreciate you being engaged in that way. So any questions on 1066 or 250 before we move on? All right, so we'll kind of quickly go through these. You may have realized that I have a bit of a cough and overcoming a cold, so I tried to put as much content on the screen as possible so you have it all there. So I'll try to quickly run through these, but again, feel free to stop me if you have questions. House Enrolled Act 1002 was the permanent decoupling bill. This doesn't really impact private schools because you weren't required to do this anyway. But for all other schools, they no longer have to include iLearn results on educator evaluations. Senate Bill 319 removes that 15-hour PGP requirement that came from last session that we heard a lot of concern about. This just makes it a may. So schools may do it, teachers may do it. I know there are opportunities that the Governor's Workforce Cabinet and Department of Education are working on for educators who are interested in pursuing the 15-hour PGP requirement. Again, it's no longer a mandate, it is a may. Senate Bill 295, this is something we tried to fix last year and it ended up dying at the end, again, to that cursive writing mandate. It just clarifies the child abuse and sexual abuse training. There was some concern that research and evidence-based, there was no program that met those requirements, so this just says research or evidence-based. And then House Bill 1065, which was a large various tax matters bill, included a provision that removed the 130 million cap on CTE funds. I'm not sure if this will impact many of you because of the limited access to CTE funds, but if you have existing partnerships with your traditional public partners, this may free up some CTE funds for some of your students. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about 1066. 1066 was a large education provision bill. I tried to hit, the voucher piece was one that we talked about earlier on, but there are a few others in there. One is student records. In an effort for student safety, it clarifies that any public and private school must share individual student discipline records if they will, if it's believed that they could impact student safety or school safety. So if a student leaves your school, transfers to a public school, you have a student discipline record that you think could impact or would be helpful for the new school to know and understand that student's background, you're required to share it. The school may request that from you. Also requires the DOE to prepare a report looking at student ADM records. So I'm sure all of you heard about, and this was a big issue all throughout session, the virtual charter school scandal, the 2 Daleville authorized virtual schools. There were attempts left and right from legislators to try to overregulate the charter industry. So they kind of got the focus of the heat this year, which made it a little easier for private schools, I think, this year. But in response to this, in response to the State Board of Accounts audit on what Daleville did, it was clear that there are some concerns about how much control DOE has in their ADM system. And so this is just really a first step. It requires DOE to prepare a report. Nothing new should be collected from schools. It's information they're already collecting, but clearly weren't looking at closely. Things like course completion records, test participation numbers, the number of students enrolled who are over the age of 20. So they have to put a report together. This includes all school types. The report will be given to the legislature so they can determine if additional actions need to be taken headed into the 2021 session. Ideally, the DOE will work to see what shortcomings their system has, and hopefully do an internal audit of that. And as we transition into a new superintendent next year, hopefully this will be a priority to make sure that we're tracking all students properly and that no school is frauding the system and taking money away from others. So that's the purpose of that provision. A couple other things in here. It requires the majority of benchmark and formative assessments. So the formative assessment grants must indicate the degree to which students are on track. So this is just how do we make sure they are aligned to the summative assessment, and that the formative test is really aiding schools in preparing for that. Includes student suspension language that requires a principal to ensure that suspended students receive any assignments or opportunity to do missed work, just like they would if they were currently in school. I double checked this statute. I'm not 100% positive that it actually applies to private schools. So we're trying to get clarity on that. If that's something that interests you or concerns you, please let us know and we'll circle up with you. But I think this may only apply to public schools. And the last thing I wanted to mention on 1066 is the grad pathway section. It just encourages state boards to approve a utility industry grad pathway and ask the governor's workforce cabinet to look at course sequencing that may lead to high wage, high demand jobs as they put forward additional grad pathway options. If anyone from the crossing is on the phone, just want to mention that 1066 is also the bill that included that fix for the charter school partnership language that we needed. That's already in there as well. So any questions on 1066 before we move on? All right, House Bill 1265 was the drinking water testing. Requires all schools in the state to be tested for lead before January 2023. This is a program that's funded through the Indiana Finance Authority and federal funds. So many schools throughout the state have already been tested. If you were tested between 2016 and 2020, you already meet the requirement. You don't need to do anything more. The bill also has an additional requirement for Lake County schools specifically. So beginning in 2023, each school building will need to be tested once every 2 years. Again, this isn't supposed to be any sort of financial cost for schools. The testing should be paid for all through federal funding, and I've included a link there if you have more information or if you have more questions about what that looks like. We're also happy to answer any questions and dive into this if you need assistance as well. Senate Bill 246 is the mental health in school bill. This requires all public schools to have an MOU in place with a community mental health provider. It is just an MOU. It doesn't force a service or a contract, but it's meant to be a referral partnership so that if students need services, they have a place to go. The current statute is very clear that you must have parental consent before you can refer a student to services. Based on the information shared during testimony, most schools already have some sort of partnership in place. This will only impact non-public schools if you're wishing to apply for a secured school grant. So public schools are required to have an MOU in place, period. Non-public schools are not, but if you want to apply for a secured school grant moving forward, you have to have a partnership in place. I know the State Department of Health plans to be a resource, plans to have MOUs available, draft MOUs available that you can see what they look like, and will also help to connect you with potential resources in your community. Moving on to the next slide, Senate Bill 346. This bill is a result of really the dyslexia community and some students who did not receive accommodations they thought they were entitled to on last year's iLearn test. This became a very complicated issue with federal testing law and federal special ed law kind of coming into conflict at times. So essentially what this bill does, a number of things. On testing accommodations, it requires the DOE to provide the same text-to-speech, screen reader, or human reader and calculator accommodations to a 6th to 12th grade student on every section of the statewide exam if that accommodation is part of the student's IEP. There are a number of other provisions in here that they put in as safeguards for the DOE, such as making sure any guidance they issue is approved by the state board. And it also clarifies that a student's score on iLearn can't be the primary factor used in making determinations about what courses or programs of study a student is eligible for. The bill also creates a task force that will review all accommodations provided for iLearn and specifically take a look at separating the academic standard of reading comprehension into two separate standards. So that was the big sticking point this last year, is that if we are assessing reading comprehension, we actually need the student to read in order to look at reading comprehension. And so this is where we get into where it's over my head. I am the furthest thing from a special ed expert. This bill got really complicated and really emotional for a lot of people. This bill, at the end of the day, they believe it was a good step forward to ensure that, one, we're meeting the needs of students who, and their IEPs, what their case conference has determined is best for them, and that we will be testing them properly and have a true understanding of where they are. So if we flip to the next slide, it just shows a few more things on 346. The notice requires DOE to develop a notice for parents if students will not be allowed to use an accommodation on their iLearn that they're used to having in their daily work because of what's in their IEP. And it requires the schools to share that notice with the parents during their annual case conference. In some cases, it may allow schools to specifically say that the parents can opt out. This language was tweaked over time because we don't want a massive group of students, particularly our special needs students, opting out of assessments. But in the rare cases where their accommodations issued in their IEP may not be allowed under federal law to give those same accommodations on a test, schools will have to notify parents of that. And then the last thing in this bill is the State Board of Ed appointment. So this will require one of the governor's appointees to be a licensed special ed teacher or director at the time of their appointment. I believe it will require one of the appointments that are up in this coming June to be changed to make sure we have a special ed expert on the board. I know there are some members currently on the board who do have special ed background, but so just keep that in mind. If any of you know a special ed teacher or director that would be a great addition to the state board, please pass their name along to us, because I believe the governor's office will be looking for a special ed expert in the near future. So that is the end of the bills that I pulled out to highlight. The next slide is just a link to our choice bill tracker. So this has been updated to include everything that passed the General Assembly this session. You can click on it for news stories to get the individual bill. So if there are any on here that you see that you have questions about, please let us know. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that I may not have hit along the way. While you all are thinking of your questions, we can flip to the next slide. This is just DOE's legislative guidance website. So as they begin to put out specific guidance on the individual bills that pass, they will be updated at this website. They will likely also send them out in their weekly update emails. So keep your eyes posted for that. Looks like one question we have is, will the PowerPoint slides be made available? And yes, we're recording this session, so we'll send out the recording, and then we'll make sure you have the presentation as well, so you have access to all this information. Any other questions? All right, well, if there are no other questions, thanks again for joining. Good luck to everyone with e-learning and social distancing and trying to figure out how to serve our students well during this time. Please let the team at IQE know if there's anything that we can do to help in that. And again, any questions you have, that pop up, you know, this week, next week, and a month from now about anything legislative, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Thanks again.